Israel Update with Gadi Taub and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's a year and 22 days since this war began. It's the 29th of October. And finally, we are recording on a Tuesday. The producer of this show is Yaakov Wilner. I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv, and Mike Duran is still himself at the Hudson headquarters. Shalom, Mike.
Shalom, Gadi. How are you?
I'm okay. We have a lot on our plate today, and I'll just mention some of the things we're going to discuss, because we are going to discuss the question, is there an agreement forming for Lebanon? We are going to discuss a law against UNRWA that passed the Israeli Knesset, and we are going to discuss my piece about the conceptia. And finally, we're also going to look back at our controversy from last time. Some of our viewers were, how do I put it, pleasantly rattled? Is that a way to explain it? We'll talk about that.
No, they were convinced that I was right and you were wrong. Overwhelmingly.
Yes.
That's how
Yes.
that's how I read it.
You just read one comment, Mike. I'll read you the rest. But let's start with the headlines.
Okay. So on Monday, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at the opening session of the Knesset and stated regarding Israel's retaliatory strikes against Iran that, quote, we severely damaged Iran's defensive systems and its ability to export missiles. He also responded to claims that Israel does not have a strategy. After each of our achievements, he said, I hear from the Leshevarim, the formers in the studios, the former generals, etc., and they say, what is your strategy? So if it's not clear to them by now, the long-term strategy is to dismantle the axis of evil, cut off its arms in the south and in the north, and prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. I have not given up and will not give up on achieving this central goal. Also on Monday, Gadi, the Knesset overwhelmingly voted in favor of legislation that would ban all UNRWA activity in Israel, something that you and I will talk about in a minute. This follows findings that UNRWA workers had actively participated in Hamas's massacre on October 7th and, of course, worked to shield Hamas infrastructure in Gaza, among other things. Egyptian President Sisi stated in a press conference on Sunday that Egypt has put forward a proposal for a temporary 2-day ceasefire in Gaza in exchange. Whoops. Somebody just called me and I lost my text here. 2-day ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for 4 hostages being returned afterwards. The goal would be to set the stage for negotiations for a longer, more durable ceasefire. In this morning's paper, Yediot Achronot, Gadi, Nadav Eyal reports that major progress has been made in negotiations between the Israeli and Lebanese officials to end the war between the two countries. He quotes an unnamed senior Israeli official who describes the negotiations over Lebanon as being, quote, in advanced stages of crystallization, unquote. That's also something that you and I will talk about. Back over to you, Gadi.
So let's start with that, Mike, because that's a headline capturing item on the news, because if true, it may signify the beginning of the end of the war in Lebanon. Do you think that this is the direction in which things are heading?
Maybe, I would say. I did a little digging on this, and I think I have a pretty good idea of the general contours of the debate among the Israeli security elite, including the prime minister. And I think when you want to understand what a country is going to do, it's important to understand the debate. So the debate is between those who say we have to press on to the end, and the end is, as was described in Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, dismantling the Iranian regional system and the Iranian nuclear program. I was really surprised that in this morning's papers there was very little quotation of that particular line where he said, "We're going to go to the end and destroy the Iranian nuclear program." It's a very interesting line, and it's a change in war aims, which did not get reported.
It also means I was right last time, but yeah, go on, please.
Sorry. Sometimes when you talk, I don't hear you.
It happens to many people who have been in the wrong.
Okay, so look, you made me laugh, and I lost my train of thought here. Oh,
yeah, you mentioned Netanyahu.
So one side all the way to the end. The other side is saying we've basically done enough. We should look for a way to lock in the gains that we've made so far, and look for a ceasefire. Get the hostages out in Lebanon and in Gaza, and lock in the gains that we've made in Lebanon. What they have decided is, and Nadav Eyal reports this, by the way. What they have decided, and he didn't report it the way I just stated it, but he reports that there's no willingness to stop fighting in Lebanon until there's actually an agreement on Lebanon. So that the Lebanese would like to have the Hezbollah, Iran, the Americans would like to have a ceasefire, during which the new political settlement or arrangement in Lebanon will be worked out. And the Israeli position, and this is a compromise between the two elements in the Israeli elite, the Israeli position is, we're going to negotiate while we continue to fight. And we're not going to lift our boot from Hezbollah's neck until we get the kind of agreement that we want. Sorry, I'm having technical problems here.
Yeah, who is looking for you with that urgency?
I don't know. Well, I do know actually, because I can see the name, but I'm not going to tell you because it would be embarrassing for President Biden if the world knew that he was coming to me every day for advice. So I'm not going to tell you. So, don't tell.
Very quietly.
Yeah. So what's happened? What I think that Nadav Eyal piece represents is not it's not a falsehood. It's just one side of the debate. He's representing those who want to try to legitimate the idea of bringing it to an end right now. There's no clear decision in Israel that that's the thing to do.
Well, I'll say something about Nadav Eyal and how I think this constellation came about, because these are high-ranking senior sources within the Israeli political establishment. There is Amos Hochstein, and there is Nadav Eyal. And there you have it, what the Americans have been trying to arrange all through the war. They always have a Trojan horse in the guise of a Gantz or a Gallant or someone. They always have a hand and a foot inside the upper echelons of the IDF, which many in the brass speak the American point of view. We know Hochstein. We know the Americans want to shut down this war. And we also know that Nadav Eyal is pretty reliably representing the American point of view, and as many among our journalists do. So it's the same alliance that you and I have been talking about for ages. I mean, ever since this podcast was first born, a year and 2 weeks ago, I think it was. It was 1 week after the beginning of the war, and it's the alliance of the anti-Netanyahu forces. Now, I think that Netanyahu is much more in a much more stable position now. So, if I read him correctly, he would be saying, "Okay, you can go on with exploring these options as long as I don't stop the fighting. And as long as I don't stop the fighting, it remains up to me, because the Lebanese, what they want is a ceasefire. They don't want an agreement." Now, there can be a situation in which these forces will try to impose 1701 or a version of it. And you see again the same array of forces. Nadav Eyal said 1701 at the very beginning of this campaign, and what a coincidence. So did Blinken, and so did Hochstein, and so did the dovish part of our brass, and everyone else. And if you go one step one step backwards, you would see that they were shocked by the beepers. And if you go to 1 minute before the beeper, then Ronen Bergman, also a senior writer
Mouthpiece.
for Achronot, quoted an army source that said that Israel is on a brink of doing something very irresponsible in Lebanon, and it has to stop before it ignites a regional war. 16 hours later, the beepers exploded, and everybody.
I need that quote. I missed that. That's really.
I'll send it to you. I just made a long tweet about it because my friend Moshe Kowalski reminded me of the whole thing and ran the details. And he said, these are one of the things that grew old the fastest in Israeli journalism. And
I totally missed that, and it's a gem. Okay, I want to see that.
I'll send you this gem because I also thought this is why I went back to it now, because I said, stop listening to these people. Now, on a personal note, because in Israel everything is personal, let me tell you something about Nadav Eyal, and I'm not going to mention all our nasty exchanges, but about the methodology that I think Nadav Eyal employs, which you analyze exactly right. What does he do? He takes something that's not entirely false, and he describes reality in such a way that it would be pushed in some direction or influenced in some direction. And this began with Nadav Eyal reported the first full unit refusal in the struggle over the reform. They called it stopping their volunteering. But he reported about the first full unit. It was a team of 4 people, 3 of which are called Uri. So they are called in their commando unit, they are called Tzevet Urim, the Urim team. And he reported that they declared that they would not serve a dictatorship and all the rest of the claptrap that they used before in the struggle over the reform. And I read this piece and I thought, well, they declared, did they? And there were quotes from the declaration, and I thought, where was the declaration? And so I called the IDF spokesperson and I said, did this unit of the Urim, did they submit anything to their commanding officers? And they said, no, we never heard of it. We read about it in the paper. So I said...
They declared it to the mirror in the morning when they were shaving.
No, they declared it to Nadav Eyal. And I was wondering whether Nadav Eyal helped formulate the declaration. So I called him. And I called him, I have the recording it, and I asked a few questions. Where was this declaration published? Did they give it to the army? Or, Mr. Eyal, did they just give it to you? Or did you take part in it? And he answered one question that was besides the point, and then he said something like, I'm not going to answer questions that were formulated in malice or something like that. And so I had his response, and I published a whole piece in Ma'ariv about it. And said, and this is the way he works, because Nadav Eyal is there's when you take a serious look at this, there's a whole strata in Israeli society, the Kaplanistim and their supporters in the press, who are very, very worried. And I think Nadav Eyal is sincerely very worried. He thinks this country has been kidnapped by wild messianic right-wingers, and it's his mission to help save it. So what does he do as a reporter? Well, he does what all of the media does now, so we can't blame only Nadav Eyal for it. They've became activists. And
I have a lot of Israeli friends who are in that category. They truly believe that that Smotrich and Ben Gvir are driving with they're in the driver's seat, and Netanyahu is sitting in the back seat of the car, and it's going toward a precipice. That's basically how they see it. I have a slight disagreement with you, or a difference of opinion, which goes to the heart of our disagreement last time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with anything that you just said, but I think that reality has moved on a little bit, and from the entrenched positions that everybody was in 3 months ago or 2 months ago or a month ago. Let me give a couple of examples. On the American side, I have on very good authority that Amos Hochstein can call up Biden and get him on the cell phone. He worked for him on the Hill. They're very close. Biden trusts him. He's not going to be part of the Kamala Harris administration. If there will not be a Kamala Harris administration, but if there were to be one, he would not be part of it. Anyway, he called up Biden or went to Biden on the Israeli-Hezbollah negotiations. After the killing of Nasrallah, he shifted and he went to Biden and he said that we should lift the prohibition against the Israelis. We should lift our opposition to the Israelis going in on the ground in Lebanon. And so it was his intervention with Biden that shifted American policy that said that the Americans would support Israel going in on this 2 or 3 kilometer, 5 kilometer, whatever it is, stretch all along the border. So he softened the American position, and he went to the Lebanese and said, "No, it's a new reality now that Nasrallah is gone." That's one, and two. I think among the Israelis, the elite, and including the political elite, there's more of a sense now that real achievements in Lebanon and in Gaza have been registered, and that maybe this wouldn't be a bad time real achievements in Lebanon, Gaza, and Iran have been registered, and this wouldn't be a bad time to have a ceasefire. But Netanyahu's position, it seems to me, is provided we get certain, explicit things. I don't know exactly how they have defined among themselves what would constitute an achievement in Lebanon at this stage that we could accept and present to our own people as enhancing the security of the northern communities, which is, of course, the key issue. But I suspect
it's the key issue, but it's no longer the aim. If you take into account what Netanyahu said in the Knesset, then dismantling the Iranian axis of evil is the war aim. It's not the official war aim, by the way. And since we have a very strange system, this was not certified or approved by the cabinet, and therefore the legal establishment can intervene and say that these war aims were not established. But probably he will have some decision in the cabinet, because this is a redefinition of the actual war aims. Which
sure, but you can have a ceasefire in Gaza and a ceasefire in Lebanon. And without saying that you are somehow stopping the effort to end Iran's nuclear program. There's no reason why you have to keep fighting in those two those two theaters in order to go after the nuclear program.
But judging from Netanyahu's behavior, not just his words, and I think his words have been very straightforward throughout this war. He's good at maneuvering when he needs to say something in order to achieve something else, but he was very straightforward, and this is working for him politically, and this is in line with all he believes about his role as the leader of Israel, and it's in line with the way the public understands Israel's existential interests, and this is total victory. There has not been one speech in which he did not say that he aims for total victory. So a ceasefire, if I smell correctly, this Nadav Eyal kind of a coalition, then Netanyahu, in his heart of heart, is just sneering at this or laughing.
Well, okay, we got to move on, but let me just have one more sentence, which
Sure.
is I agree with what you're saying, except I have no idea what total victory means in Netanyahu's mind with respect to Lebanon.
It's like love, Mike. When it happens, you'll know. I'm kidding. I think that if we asked him, he would formulate it in a way very close to the way he formulated the war aims in Gaza, dismantling the military and the governing abilities of Hezbollah. It's much more complicated.
It's not possible. That's the part. That's not. He might say that if he said that, that means war forever, because that's not possible. Israel does not have the capabilities to do that. Gaza. That's the difference in Gaza and Lebanon. We'll talk about this more some other time, because
All right.
we got other important things to discuss here.
Okay, so the next important thing to discuss is really important, and that's my piece about conceptia. And this I published a summary of it in Hebrew. I'll say what
First of all,
is.
let's say where it is. It's in Mosaic Magazine.
Yeah, and it's a response to Shani Mo, who wrote a long essay about what were the concepts that blinded Israel to the coming of October 7. And of the four he mentioned, I agreed with one. And then I wrote a summary of it, and in Hebrew, and someone was a very shrewd commentator on Twitter here, Avishai Ivri, wrote a short tweet that only said, "If I may," and put a piece of his, which said something pretty similar. And he said it on the 26th of October. Luckily, I have a recording that I first formulated this on October 17, which is 10 days after the beginning of the war. And ever since, I've been thinking about it. So when Jonathan Silver approached me to answer...
the editor of Mosaic.
To answer a piece by Shani Mo, this is something that's been percolating for long. So I'll just introduce it, Mike, if you don't mind, in very general terms, and then you can respond, preferably in an approving manner. But I'll say this: what I try to say is that it's not one conception that led to October 7. Neither is it a group of disconnected conceptions. I said it's like a matryoshka doll, that there is a small, there's a very big conception under which there are more specific conceptions in reduced levels of abstraction that lead all the way to the military failure. And I counted them from the inside out. So in the military failure, I was happy to make use of the piece that you and John Casapoulou wrote for Tablet about the gates of Gaza. And I said the core of it is a defensive posture rather than an offensive posture, and that this defensive posture is reliant on technology. Basically, we were huddled behind a sophisticated border wall and an iron dome, protecting ourselves. And I said that this was wrong on all levels. I won't get into the details now, just to say that this is never a good idea. Walls in the end don't work. The Great Wall of China, Hitler's Atlantic Wall, the Maginot Line, the Bar-Lev Line, the Siegfried Line. When you are only defending yourself behind a wall, your enemy will study your routine, find the vulnerabilities, and then surprise you because you leave the initiatives to them. But also, I said, we counted on very high technology, and in the beautiful metaphor from your piece, which I keep using, is we were ready, along with all the West, for Star Wars, and they gave us Mad Max. And if you haven't seen the films Mad Max, check out a few clips and you'll understand everything, because they did everything with low tech. So if we can penetrate cell phones, Yahya Sinwar used handwritten notes because he knew we can penetrate cell phones. And we had a sophisticated slurry wall, and they could blind us with drones that you can get off the shelf in electronic stores and so forth. And so with bicycles and gliders and Toyota pickup trucks, they managed to outwit the IDF. So that's the little matryoshka doll in the middle. That's the tactical military level. Above this, there was a political level and the idea of separation, which contains the idea of a border wall that and it's enveloped in the idea of a two-state solution, right? Because unilateral withdrawal is just another version of the two-state solution, not through agreement, but rather through imposition. And that conception of the two-state solution is contained in a larger conception, which is the idea that we are dealing with a national movement like our own, a national liberation movement like our own, and that the logic of this is the rational interests of independent states, nation states. And I said their national movement is not like ours. In this, Shani Mo also touched on this, that their national movement, the main goal is not nation building, it's nation destruction. Their goal is not to build their own nation, it's to destroy ours. And therefore, the center of the Palestinian national ethos is the right of return, what they call the right of return. There's no such right in international law, but it means the demographic annihilation of the state of Israel through resettling 5 million Palestinians within Israel's borders, finishing putting an end to Jewish political independence. And that, Mike, and I think we are going to have, maybe not now, a greater disagreement because we just touched on it last time on this point, is that the whole thing is contained in one strand of Western thought of human nature. And I wrote the piece and I said, and the last one said that the grand misconception is the Western misconception of human nature. And then I struck out and I said, because not everyone shares it. It's the materialistic idea, best phrase by, say, Obama, who said, everyone, in the end of the day, everyone wants a decent job, food on the table, and a safe environment to grow their children. Not so. This is, and this is, socialists and liberals share this view of Homo economicus, which is also based on a narrow materialistic idea of human beings as rational choosers. And this gives us no way to conceptualize the most sublime and the most evil in human nature. And we just assumed that if we give them economic betterment, it would not be in their interest to attack us. And Tamir Heyman, I brought this quote from you, it's outrageous and amazing, was the head of IDF intelligence, which in Israel is the director of national intelligence. He's a former director, לשעבר, and he now heads the INSS. He's the director general of the INSS. And 2 months before the war, he said, there's not going to be a war. And I don't need to look at the intelligence because I know what the interests are. So we imagined their national movement as our own. And then we imagined their motivation based on our misconception of even ourselves. And after the disaster happened, I think we came to realize that our conception of ourselves was also wrong because we found powers in ourselves that we didn't imagine. We thought, oh, this generation, they only care about Facebook and whatever, and they're materialistic and individualistic, and we discovered a great force of patriotism. So that's basically the essay, except to say that it gives great credit to Netanyahu for being so persistent against so many forces arrayed against him. And so, because, there's an essay, it's actually here. There's an essay by Isaiah Berlin called Churchill in 1940, in which he says, Churchill didn't create the British determination to find the Nazis. He awakened it. It was dormant in their hearts. And I think that Netanyahu did the same with Israelis, except that Churchill had at his command the whole of British society. And Netanyahu had to do it over against the IDF brass, against a hostile press, against a treacherous opposition and coalition partners, and most of all, against an American administration. Churchill, in the end, had Roosevelt. We had Obama in the guise of, Biden.
All right. So just a couple of responses. One is, it's a very good essay. Everybody should read it. It's at Mosaic. It is Mosaic, I believe, is behind a paywall. If I'm not mistaken, I paid for a subscription to Mosaic, so I go there without problems. If I recall correctly, they give you 2 reads before they block you. So if you're not already, yeah, make it one of your reads. You said that you thought this is going to be a point of disagreement between us. I don't think so. We'll explore that at some other time. What I found most interesting, or about the exchange between you and Shani Moore, is that Shani Moore said half of what you said, or one part. I mean, you latched on one of the things that he said. It was part of the conception, was this mistaken attachment to a two-state solution. You then took that and unpacked it and showed that it was all the Matryoshka dolls, that the two-state solution is a whole approach to the Middle East, to Israel, to human nature, etc. And I agreed with all of that. What I really found surprising was that Shani Moore also said that he blamed the settlers in his which I think the blaming of the settlers is part of the mistaken two-state solution. I didn't think that his position was coherent. Because if you accept that the attachment to the two-state solution and all of that means is a mistake of Israel and the West in terms of trying to settle the conflicts or stabilize the region, then you have to come to the conclusion that the settlers really aren't the problem. Whether you like them or not, whether you agree with them or not, it's not they're not causing the conflict with the main reason for the perpetuation of the conflict with the Palestinians, which of course is what the Biden administration believes. I mean, the Biden administration believes that the settlers are the problem, and that's why it's working so hard to undermine them while in the midst of this war. I've come across this attitude from a lot of people in the Israeli security establishment, where they really truly believe. A minute ago you were talking about what Nadav Eyal really believes, that he's really trying to save the world. There are lots of people in the security establishment, in the Tamir Heyman wing of the security establishment, who think that the settlers and Netanyahu are the problem.
Yeah.
And that if they didn't exist, if they weren't there with all of their power and influence, then we could come to the agreement with the Americans about our neighborhood, our immediate neighborhood, and the whole region. This is the thing that I bang on about all the time with Tom Friedman and so on, is that Tom Friedman is always dangling out this grand coalition against Iran,
Yeah.
which would exist were it not for the settlers. And it's complete hogwash, because what it ignores is that appeasement of Iran is at the heart of the Biden policy, whether there are settlers or no settlers. So it's stupid. But a lot of people believe it, and they believe it sincerely. They're not simply dishonest. Okay, well, I think we should probably move on, huh?
Yeah, just one sentence is that it's very hard to make this point about the settlers in relation to October 7, because very simply, if Israel had stayed in Gaza and left the settlements there would not be October 7. That's Israelis at least firmly believe that. Okay, UNRWA. Finally, Israel enacted a bill basically outlawing any dealings of the state with UNRWA, and that is in clear violation to an American demand not to do this. So if Israel did not violate the American dictum about attacking nuclear facilities in Iran, here with this law, 91 members of Knesset, this is a very, very large majority, voted for this law to outlaw UNRWA. I'll say what UNRWA is unbelievably disgusting. I don't know if you saw this video of UNRWA social workers with professional vests, UN staff, taking a body of a dead youngster, Samarano is his name, and just heaving it into a truck. Why would they snatch bodies? Because bodies are a chip in the negotiation. So these are UNRWA people. There was a great uproar here about 12 UNRWA people who had turned out to participate in the October 7 massacre. Let me tell you, Mike, because I know from sources that I can't reveal, that this was mistakenly leaked by the army. The army was trying not to disclose because they are working with UNRWA. And their theory is that, well, if we take out UNRWA, there'll be a vacuum, and who will help us? So the army tried to hide this, and it leaked out because some officers sent the email to a mistaken address. And then it turned out that there are many more. There are dozens, not a dozen, who participated in this. There are hundreds of UNRWA workers who are active soldiers in Hamas, active terrorists, armed terrorists, hundreds among UNRWA workers. And one last detail, there are 12,790 UNRWA employees in Gaza. Of this, 12,000 are 12,000 are either Hamas registered members or are married to a Hamas registered member. So there's really not much different. UNRWA schools hide weapons. UNRWA and Hamas are not even separate, and they hide under this, like the whole industry of, human rights organizations, under the uniform of the UN. They are basically a terror supporting organization. They were created allegedly in order to take care of Palestinian refugees. In truth, they were created to perpetuate the Palestinian refugee problem and use it and weaponize it against the state of Israel. So I'll say something about the law. A lot of people are disappointed, by the way, on the right. But first, Mike, what's your take on that?
Oh, I agree with everything you're saying. UNRWA should be abolished. Let me just read to you something related. It's not exactly about UNRWA, but that is in this morning's Israeli press. This is by a guy named Avi Ashkenazi. I don't know who he is. Do you know him?
No.
He
might have been the commander of the Central Theater.
I don't think so. He's writing in Ma'ariv. It's just a reporter, I think, writing in Ma'ariv. He says new details have emerged about the tactics that the IDF used in Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip. This is a recent. There were a lot of clips of large numbers of young men, presumably Hamasniks, surrendering to Israel, along with claims of lots of civilians killed, of course. Military officials say that all of the groups of terrorists that had remained in the northern Gaza Strip had gathered in Jabalia, prompting a decision to intensify the fighting in that refugee camp. The IDF decided to surround the camp, to establish exit points to allow the civilian population to leave, to isolate the terrorists and prevent them from fleeing. Within the space of a few hours overnight, the IDF had surrounded the camp completely. Military officials said Hamas's surprise was absolute. We locked hundreds of terrorists, including high-ranking terrorists, inside the camp. Hamas held the civilian population as a shield for more than a week. They shot residents who tried to flee in the legs. Okay? Unquote. I'm going to assume that the last line is the key one here. I'm going to assume that that's 100% true. I have no reason not to believe that, and I believe that that's the Hamas's whole strategy is to put civilians between it and the Israelis. This is 100% obvious, and UNRWA is complicit in this strategy of protecting the terrorists with civilian infrastructure. I saw this morning just before we started to do our thing, so I don't know. I haven't gone to see everything that's been said about Jabalia over the last couple of weeks. What I do know is that what I did see in the international press about Jabalia over the last 2 weeks was all about Israel killing civilians. I didn't see a single thing about Hamas killing civilians. I could be wrong. Maybe it's out there and everything, but this is the key issue. This is the key issue that we should all be appalled, absolutely appalled by what Hamas does with civilians. Our leadership should be demanding at every moment. Our leadership, Biden, Harris, that Hamas stop doing this, that it be condemned for it, and should also be saying that Israel should destroy Hamas. It is an abomination. Of course, that is not our position. It's unfortunate. But anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, you used exactly the words of the one critic of the law in the Knesset, member of Knesset, Amit Halevi. We had him on one of our specials here for a talk of about an hour at the beginning of the war. And he used the word abomination, to'eva, for UNRWA. Excuse me. And he also said that the law has no teeth. What they wanted to do originally is label UNRWA a terror supporting organization, which of course it is. And then that equips the state with the tools and with the responsibility of taking action against UNRWA. What Halevi said about this law is that it's passive. It prevents all state agencies from doing any dealing with UNRWA. This is, of course, that puts obstacles in UNRWA's way. But the matpash, the dovish part of the army, which deals with UNRWA and has been protecting it. What they did is what they'll do is what they did with the vaccines, the polio vaccines that they distributed in Gaza, where they said there was an uproar about giving them to UNRWA, so they gave it to some NGO, and that NGO,
right, they'll create a buffer, right?
Yeah, and they'll do it again. So now,
what the United States
Israel
does with
cannot issue.
Hezbollah.
UNRWA employees have diplomatic immunity. So these are visas issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So now it can't do it. But what will happen is they will register with some NGO, or at least the foreigners among them will register with some NGO, get their visa through that NGO, and go back to their work with a different shirt. So Amit Halevi said there's no action to be taken for UNRWA is illegally occupying a compound in Jerusalem, and they have been giving a notice that they need to evacuate it, but they have done nothing. But nobody is doing anything, and the law is not going to change that. Is the Jerusalem municipality going to cut off their sewage and their water? It seems not, because they're not obliged to take any action. They just can't take any positive action. So what Halevi said is that it's a first step in the right direction, but it won't achieve much. I tend to be less pessimistic, because I think that this is a first step that is important. The symbolics of it are important. We should start tearing the masks off the UNRWA terror supporters and actual terrorists. And I think that we can do it. And I think that it's in line with what the conceptual change that Netanyahu is trying to persuade the West to do, is to stop these double standards by which we protect NGOs because they say they speak in the name of human rights, and we just give them a blank check. You remember my favorite example, ISM, International Solidarity Movement, is a pro-Palestinian a human rights organization, and a very smart right-wing NGO in Israel penetrated it with a mole, with this Scandinavian woman who is very charming, and got into it, and she penetrated it all the way to their finances. And where do they get the money? These human rights organizers. Hamas gives them their money in Gaza. And she found the sources of the money. So Hamas is sophisticated in manipulating our own values against us. It found the hole, which is, I like to call it, the autoimmune disease that the West has, that's called wokeness, that lets radical racism, barbarity, and sadism penetrate our cultures under the guise of tolerance and pluralism, and then we have to eat the sour fruit. And when the terrorists attack and slaughter journalists for publishing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, what does Europe do? It legislates against blasphemy. So it brings back religious intolerance in return. So hopefully this is the beginning of a good thing in which we will unmask such double standards. Mike, we have two more things to do. One is respond to our viewers' comments, and they referred mostly to the controversy we had last time. Apparently, a lot of Americans are surprised that we managed to disagree sharply without becoming enemies. And as an Israeli, this is not a surprise to me.
I collected some comments here to read. But before I do that, let me just say, how now that a few days have passed and you've had time to absorb my wisdom, how closer to me have you moved?
2 steps away.
So you are more entrenched in your position than before.
No, I'm exaggerating, but I'm much less proficient than you on what the results, the military results, and the strategic analysis, which has to take into account the different armed forces. But I think I do have a feeling for what's going on here and for what Netanyahu's aims are. And I've been also talking to people. I'll say up front. This is not a reliable, this is not sourced back to Netanyahu in any way. I don't have his approval for this interpretation, not even in a roundabout way. But my sense of his whole career is that this is the moment he has been waiting for and speaking about. And this is the mark he wants to leave on history. And this is not a personal egotistical thing. This is also what he thinks is Israel's existential interest. And I don't think that he will easily let the chance slip. So that's why I didn't move.
But those are two different things, because
but they converge.
No, well, they may or may not, because the question is, was the attack a good thing, beneficial? You said it was a missed opportunity, and
the question was this attack enough?
Yeah, well, enough at this moment. I bet you Netanyahu is very happy with the attack. I have no information about this whatsoever, but I think it was brilliant. They destroyed all of the air defenses of Iran, and they set back the production of those ballistic missiles, the kind that Iran used on October 1. They set back the production of them by many, many months, maybe even years. And that changes the military balance, because that is the one weapon that is most threatening to Israel. The Iranians, if they don't respond, they look weak. If they respond, they're completely naked before an Israeli attack, and they open themselves up to an even harsher Israeli attack. So Israel has reestablished escalation dominance, which I think was their goal at this point in the war. And I think it's a fantastic thing.
I read an essay of yours, I think more than a year ago it was, about the fact that they have stockpiled so much of this that they will not need to manufacture their drones and their missiles for a while. Am I misreading your essay? It was in Mosaic, actually, I think.
No, they have very large stockpiles of all these different kinds of weapons, but this particular weapon, the estimates I've seen is that they had about 2,000 on hand, and they've sent off about 500. So they have about 1,500 left. They don't have what I used to say in these in our analyses here is that Iran could launch one of these massive barrages for every night for a month, and it would undermine Israel economically and make Israel more dependent on the United States, and that sooner or later one of these ballistic missiles was going to get through and cause a lot of damage and so on. But what we're seeing now is that they don't have that, I don't believe. And in addition, they're going to have to start, if they use those missiles again against Israel, they're going to have to start economizing, because whatever they do, their next hit against Israel, they can't assume that will be the last one, because they're completely naked before the Israelis now. I mean, the Israelis have shown total intelligence penetration, as well as the ability to reach into Iran, fly F-35s into Iranian airspace. We have to close up here soon, because I have guests who have arrived here at the headquarters.
So we will have time to just mention readers' responses, and we'll do the dumb mistake next week. Ma kore, Mike? What are our viewers saying?
So we got more comments, I think, on this video than any other one, the one on the Iran strike. And people lined up. Some loved what you said and hated what I said, and some loved what I said and hated what you. I don't think anyone hated what you said, but they agreed more with me than you. Some agreed with both of us. And here's just a little taste. Andrew Gold, he said, potential Israel update slogan: Gotti is right most of the time. Mike too. Together they are never wrong. That's very nice. That's very nice. Here's one from Midrash 100, and he says, Michael Duran and his smothering opinionated views. He is completely wrong in his analysis. Basically, he is an American who understands nothing but loves to tell others how they have to see things.
Who's this guy? Keep his contact info. I want to know.
I had a feeling you'd like him. Here, I got to put on my glasses to see.
You need a microscope?
I can't read this one. Anyway, it says, holy moly, even if I was sweating, I commend you both holding, even I was sweating. I commend you both for holding to your opinions, both of which are correct. So we're both right. As an Israeli feeling nervous feeling nervous almost 24/7, my first impulse has been some disappointment that we did not do all that has to be done. But I see that Netanyahu had to do major calculations when dealing with the U.S. last week. Okay, then this is Lawrence Platsky 8639. Gotti is absolutely right. Huge missed opportunity. Expected much more and much better from Netanyahu. Anatoly.
You know who would agree with me, Mike? Ben Caspit. Because Ben Caspit, anything that he does is wrong. So
no, he did. I forgot. I meant to mention that. I was going to. No. I should have made that my dumbest take.
Yeah, sure.
You and Ben Caspit are. I checked it. You are absolutely on the same page, and I think that should make you reconsider your position. I'm sure Nadav Eyal also agrees with you. All right. Anatoly Gatelson says, I like the thoughts of both. Gotti, I love you, but please do not get mad. Be even. Now, that's an interesting one because I'm not sure what he means there. Is he saying, don't get mad, stay even keeled?
Yeah, I think that's what he means because Americans don't, because Israelis. I'll just mention this very briefly. I was
before you do.
I was in a conference. There's
another alternative here, which is he's saying, don't get mad, get even.
No, so this is also a misunderstanding because what I wanted to mention is I was at a conference at Harvard about Hebrew literature, and then some postmodern literary critic went to the podium and pointed at me sitting in the crowd. I also write literature. And he said, you are a traitor to your generation. I was critical of my generation's literature. And then we sat near each other and had a pleasant chat on the break, the lunch in the conference. And people were just flabbergasted by the fact that we could shout at each other and then have lunch together. And that's the Israeli way.
I remember this because I know we're racing here against time. I have a funny story to tell you about exactly that. But next time, don't let me forget. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Last one.
Last one.
Yeah, choose one. Try to find one where they actually do agree with you, Mike, because you said they all do, but you can't find them. So take your time.
I was trying to be generous in victory to you. Magnanimity and victory is an important characteristic.
Yeah.
Here, we'll end with this one, which is just what you said. Excellent debate between two wise men. Good to know adults can disagree and not kill each other. Toda rabah. Gracias from Panama. So the Panamanians, we have a following in Panama. Did you know
I look at the analytics and see how many people from Panama are actually following us. Well, Mike, it's been a less stormy episode, but it wasn't boring nonetheless. So I'll look forward.
I was a little bored, actually.
You were, but we'll cut these pieces out. I've decided to use my prerogative. It was just a joke last time. I never take out stuff that Mike says unless it's stuff that's uncomfortable for my opinions, in which case I also don't. So we will see you next Tuesday, hopefully.
I asked an Israeli about whether they hit undeclared nuclear sites in this strike.
Perchin, check that out.
But somebody who's in a position to know, and he said, I don't know, and if I did know, I would tell you I don't know.
Great. I think it was in a report by I think it's maybe a Turkish agency that said that we hit Parchin.
Yeah, no, you hit the Parchin's you hit a missile production facility in Parchin. I had a friend in college who lied to me, a terrible, horrible lie, and I caught him in it, and he looked at me and he said, Mike, I did lie. I want you to know I did lie to you, but I want you to understand something. I only lie to you when you know that I'm lying to you.
That's very generous. I'll end with a quote of my own from a very disturbed individual once, and I use it when I describe Yair Lapid and his postmodern mentality. And that individual said, "What's the difference between truth and lies? You say it the same way." There you go. And on this happy note, go tend to your guests, Mike, and we will see you all next Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also to like it. Goodbye from...
And to leave more comments, please.
And leave more comments because we will discuss them, as you see. And
we need...
that is all from us.
We need to game the algorithm. I will have the last word here. I will.
So, Mike, one last word. Choose one. Choose one.
Bye.